Oh, hopefully, can everyone hear us?
We should be live.
We should be live. We just
There's
got it
always
right.
you'll learn that there is a delay with the chat, and so sometimes I get frustrated. I have to remind myself because I'll ask a question, and then I see it just sort of ticking through, and I'm like, "Come on, y'all!" But then, yeah, there's a delay. But what is up, everybody? So this is your first. Is this your first live stream? Is that what you're telling me?
This is my first ever live stream. I've been on other people's. This is my first ever one, um, where I'm kind of hosting, I guess. So
Well, I
I'm
I
very
told you
nervous.
I told you I'm just gonna end up taking it away from you, no, but for the first one, but I wanted to ask you, so there's several things here I wanted to do, actually. First of all, I'm sending a bunch of people. There's a bunch of people joining us from my channel, so we're gonna have people jumping in who are gonna be like, "What? What are y'all talking about?" or whatever, but anyways, the reason why I was telling my channel, the reason why I want to file this amicus curiae brief, or it's basically a letter, it's an essay, right, to the
Yeah,
court, is I don't have any illusion that it's going to make some big difference. But I really don't like the fact that women like Elise, who was, one of the people who filed a letter, and then also organizations such as the ERA and others, I don't like the fact that they purport to speak for women in general. And I don't think that I think that the judge is way too sophisticated to let any of our letters matter, frankly. But I don't want the judge to see these letters from supposedly disinterested parties coming in support of Blake Lively, purporting to speak for all women and what's good for women. And this precedent here, this is as you know, precedent setting case. I don't like the idea that you're going to have the judge seeing these letters on Lively's side and no letters on Baldoni's side. So if Wayfarer is successful in getting the pro Lively letters stricken or whatever, great. If my letter goes in the metaphorical trash can, great. I just have some things to say. I don't like that Elise and the other organizations are purporting to speak for women. I think there's a whole other perspective here, obviously, and I think that our listeners agree with that. So that's all I'm doing. It's a short letter. Frankly, I said this earlier to my audience. I don't think the judge has the time or the patience to waste his time reading these really long letters. I mean, I was looking at Elise's, and she's just going on and on and on about her own personal, frankly, questionable trauma. And I'm just thinking, he
yeah.
ain't gonna read all that shit, honey. I mean, I just don't think he will. Sorry, that's a lot there.
No, and no. It's and I mean, these are rarely seen at this level. Normally they go into the appeal courts. Um, they're so rare actually in, lower level courts that there isn't rules for them, as everyone may now be very well aware
Oh, are
if
you
you've
saying
everyone's
that
been
it's
watching the
unusual?
drama.
I'm sorry, are you saying it's
Yeah, yeah,
unusual? It's unusual to have these kinds of letters or briefs in a trial like this?
yeah. In this level, yeah,
Wow.
they're normally seen in the appeal courts, where a judgment's been made and it's been appealed, and the judgment, like the judgment that's made at the lower level courts, you know the people who then file these amicus briefs then they have an interest, or
Mhm.
the outcome may be relevant to them. I mean, I've been very candid about some of my experiences. I'm kind of come here, and I've had a lot of hope in the film because of my own marriage. I've been through it's not called discovery over here, but I've been through the police process and giving evidence, handing over my devices, and having everything I said and claimed happened scrutinized to death and back. And it's not comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable. Claims have to be tested for a reason.
Right.
And I cannot. I appreciate what they're saying. I really do. I understand where the charities are coming from. I'm less kind of. I didn't like the Celeste Dorsey. I didn't really like her filing. When you look into what actually happened. um, but I can understand some of the charities and the people they're representing, so I understand their views. However, there has to be at least discovery. I mean, they're arguing that even discovery shouldn't happen. And I'm sorry, but the rule at question here now is section 47.1, and that is only gives protection for claims that are made in good faith, without malice. And quite often you can only ascertain whether there's malice or not through discovery. So it's shutting down an opportunity for someone to defend themselves at all, even in the early stages. I agree with the deterrent that maybe, if a frivolous lawsuit is brought and the person who's accused of harassment or assault, sexual assault, then loses their case, then all these treble damages and everything, I've got no problem with that. But it's like a compensation, and making sure that the person who's been subjected to harassment obviously gets all of their costs, etc., reimbursed for, and going back through sharing stories, going through evidence and everything. That's quite traumatic. So I can understand that, but to say, well, you shouldn't even be able to file a complaint in cases where it's like they haven't even considered, well, what if this person isn't being honest? Do you know what I mean?
Right. So they explicitly, both of these briefs, the one filed on behalf of Elise and also the multiple
Mm.
organizations, both of them expressly asked for this case, Baldoni's against Lively's, to be cut off at they said it explicitly, like the earliest possible point. In other words, they want it dismissed. They want no discovery, right? And
Yeah,
they seem to be, I wanted to ask you about this. Both of these letters, like the Elise letter, I thought a lot of it was ridiculous with the rambling on about her own dubious situation, but there were some points that I think both letters were getting at, and I think that you were saying you have some sympathy for. Here's the thing that they're arguing, right? Is that these types of defamation lawsuits can be used as retaliation against lots of women who are bringing genuine claims or have made genuine claims, whether of sexual assault, we're talking about anti-slap stuff, or sexual harassment, if we're talking about the AB, whatever, right? And so
yeah,
but here's the thing, they seem to be resting on a kind of a theoretical assumption that the vast majority of defamation claims in court would be false. That is, most women, most claimants, when they say they're sexually harassed, when they say they've been sexually assaulted, the assumption that both of these letters seem to be making is that most of them are telling the truth. And therefore, since most claimants of sexual assault or sexual harassment are telling the truth, then most defamation lawsuits against those claimants therefore must be inappropriate, retaliatory, false. Now, I see, if that's your filter on the world, I see where you can look at that and you can say, so yeah, it's unfortunate that there are going to be some men, a minority of men, who are going to be falsely accused, and they're not going to have recourse to litigate it through defamation claims. But that's just the price we pay for the majority of women to not who do have legitimate claims to not suffer all of this trauma and re-traumatization and all of that. So I would ask you, how would you respond to that? And I would just start with my basic premise, which is, first of all, we never know how many claims are false or not. I'm going to keep repeating this till I'm blue in the face, but there are a wide range of studies on false claims that show a wide range of results. And so, yes, the feminists like to point at the studies that show that 2% of claims are false, but you can also find studies, yes, that show 50%, 60%, 89% at the top realm. So, first of all, that's a flawed assumption, I think. Secondly, could it be that defamation lawsuits of the kind that Baldoni has filed and that Johnny Depp and others have filed, could it be that these are actually indicators of claims that are false? In other words, maybe most of the men who take the time and the effort and the money to file defamation claims, maybe they're doing it because they have been falsely accused. And so I think that these are the false premises on which this kind of argument rests, is that first of all, we could say categorically that most harassment or sexual assault claims are true, and secondly, that most defamation claims are necessarily false. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. I mean, my sort of viewpoint is I understand what they're saying, but our starting point cannot be put in. And this isn't just a law against men. That's just it. You know, this is
Right.
going to affect women. You know, if people are assuming that because it's women who are filing these amicus briefs and female lawyers and the women's charities, that this is to protect women from men. Yes, that is obviously male to female violence is overwhelmingly, you know, these kind of these kind of uh, issues, sexual harassment, sexual assault, are overwhelmingly committed by men on women, but that is not, you know, that is not the absolute. There
Right.
are women who do assault and harass men, and it will affect them too. So men can now, in theory, if this law, um, if this law sort of is interpreted the way that the charities are pushing for,
Right.
um, men can, in theory, falsely accuse women. So that's not a good position. But just a law, any law in any sort of case, whether it be fraud, whether it be physical assault, or you know, burglary or anything. I mean, are we gonna when you start applying this kind of default, if you try to take action, if you try to do anything to defend yourself and you defend your reputation, then you know, you're not going to be able to do it. We're going to dismiss it.
They have
It's,
no
you know,
recourse.
and we're going to,
Yeah.
you know, have no absolutely no recourse. If you start it in one area in sexual harassment, then how far does, you know, before you start setting a precedent as well?
It's a great point.
Um, I justice is about balance. It's about hearing both sides and seeing the evidence from both sides. And, you know, a jury of their peers or a judge or a panel of judges making a decision, casting a judgment. That's how it's always been, and that's how it is in the criminal system as well. And it's really important to maintain that standard. I I have been through, you know, domestic violence and sexual violence, and I know all of that, but and I have been through, you know, like I say, discovery, you know, technically discovery, the whole police procedures. But it's important to do it. It's incredibly important to do it. Plus, the other thing is I think they seem to be forgetting, technically Blake Lively has actually signed up to go through the discovery process
That's
herself.
true. It's so true. I'm
She
sorry. I'm
has her
sorry.
own, you know, she has her own case. She brought her own case. She brought the case first. So by effectively, she has consented to go through discovery. So they're not saving her from anything.
Oh, it's such a great point. I'm putting that in there. I'll attribute it to you. That is such a great point here. No, but it's true. And I mean, I did bring that up in the letter that it was that she was the aggressor here, but I much like prefer the way that you are phrasing it. She signed up for this. Here's the thing, Leanne, is that you and I know that the idiot did not in her mind sign up for it because she thought none of this shit was ever going to happen. In her mind, as we know, right, she thought she was just going to walk all over Baldoni and he and Wayfarer would not sue her like this, right? And so in her
Yeah,
mind, she actually didn't sign up for it. But that is irrelevant to the fact that if she had had any sense, or the people advising her, I mean, this is like legal malpractice, whoever was advising her, if they had any sense, they should have known you are initiating a chain of events now that is going to leave this
yeah,
man and this company no recourse but to sue your asses, right?
yeah. I cannot imagine her lawyers have not had these conversations. You do. You have to explain, well, this is what's going to happen. This is what you can expect. I mean, we're well into discovery now as well. Brian Friedman himself said that in his letter. You know, that like we're not kind of, you know, about to start it. We're not at the start of it. We are well into it. I think it's, you know, it's the deadline is July or August at an absolute push, if I remember correctly. So they've made all the requests and information is already starting to be shared and people are being contacted. So I'm not sure. I don't like the arguments. As much as I can understand why the passion behind it is there, it's uh, there has to be there has to be a fail-safe for people where, you know, to be able to prove the malice part, because that's written into section 47.1, is it has to be free of malice. It has to be good faith.
Right.
But also for this in protection, you don't even have to have made a complaint. So how do you prove that these things are in good faith if you've never voiced a complaint? But also, when you file a lawsuit, you're absolved from, discovery, or you can file a motion to dismiss if someone sues you for defamation and then get dismissed. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And, one thing that I've been covering, as you know, Me Too cases, and what I think were false claims, on the whole,
Yeah,
for years now. And I do understand that it is not a good situation. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place because yes, there are a lot of cases of assault and harassment where women don't come forward because they know that if you come forward, you are going to have to go through a system. You are going to be questioned. You have to discover like these things. You're subject to defamation. Like this is the way it is. But to me, this is just like basically complaining about the fallen state of our world. Yes, it sucks that there are no great options for people who really have been assaulted or harassed. Nevertheless, that does not give us, as you said, license to then say, well, we're taking away recourse for the falsely accused. And something that I know you and I agree very much on is the age old maxim that it's better for the guilty to go free than the innocent to be punished. I mean, this goes back, this is like what hundreds of years of Western jurisprudence here resting on this idea, the presumption of innocence. And yet,
yeah,
it is still difficult. Nobody likes the idea of I have people who are dear to me who've been through domestic violence, who've been through sexual assault, harassment, whatever. It's not like I don't think these things don't exist, but we are in such a crazy world now. And one other thing I want to say, and then I'm sorry, I have to go get a Kleenex. I'm actually kind of sick. I think I got sick at the Manson concert it was outdoors and there was all this dust. So I'm actually,
oh
anyway,
no.
but here's something maybe you could address while I'm gone for a few minutes is that we are stuck at sort of between this rock and the hard place, but I don't see where we have any other option but to continue to offer people a recourse of challenging accusations that are made against them. I mean, right now, there is no better option in an imperfect situation. And here's the last point I make. It seemed to me in these amicus curiae letters that were submitted for Blake Lively's side, so to speak, right? It seemed to me they kept repeating over and over that Blake Lively is a privileged woman and that ordinary women don't have recourse to the tools and the money that she has. Okay, but let's think about it this way. Let's not pretend that Blake Lively's claims of sexual harassment are indicative of your typical woman either. Okay, come on. I've read her lawsuit, and having to watch a bit of a friend's birthing video when you're doing a scene on birthings in your fancy movie, that ain't nothing like the real sexual harassment that a woman who's working, say, in a coal mine or something. I say this, if you've ever seen the Charlize Theron movie, North Country, see what real sexual harassment is. Okay. So, anyway, I have to run for a second, but that's my thought. I'll be right back.
That's fine. I should probably say though that the this protection, it only, out of all of Baldoni's claims, it only applies to his defamation claim against Blake Lively. It does not protect, the protection does not kick in for the extortion claim or the tortious interference claims or all the other claims. And they certainly don't give Blake Lively protection for, where for Baldoni to defend himself against her claims, if that makes sense. So it's only the defamation claim that Baldoni and Wayfarer are bringing against Blake Lively that this section 47.1 applies. I know there's been a bit of confusion over that. I'm not sure what to talk about now she's gone. How is everyone?
I'm back.
Yeah, I'm not
Hey,
sure.
I
Oh,
just
thank
had to
God
get
for that.
Kleenex.
It was
Hold on a second.
silence.
Let me put my oh, turn this off though. Okay. I was listening to you on my phone as I ran to get Kleenex. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. What's up, everybody? Yeah, it's just, and I was listening to what you were saying there, and I think that it's a good thing to keep in mind too, is that this only pertains to some of his claims. And look, I've seen this with. I know that the Marilyn Manson case, is still controversial to a number of people who haven't looked into it, and that's fine. And I'm not drawing any kind of equivalency here. But I will say that, Manson, for example, Brian Warner, in his defamation suit against Evan Rachel Wood and her co-conspirator, her ex-girlfriend, he brought a series of claims against her and against them, and it wasn't just defamation. It was computer fraud, it was identity theft, it was swatting, some other things, right? And the judge struck down the defamation part because of the anti-slap law, which is so it is so extreme in California, and I believe in New York as well. There are different levels of as you know, different levels of
Yeah,
anti-slap laws, and some of them are more stringent and tighter than others. And so California is, from the perspective of a man or a person suing for defamation, in other words, they feel like they've been falsely accused of sexual assault. California is the worst place to be doing it. And again, as you know, this is why Johnny Depp's team chose to find a reason to sue in Virginia, because the laws were so much more favorable there. So my point is, the
yeah,
judge did due to the anti-slap law, did strike down the defamation part of his suit, but the other parts continued. It's just that in his case, it became more and more expensive and sort of more and more pointless to continue this after he basically had his career come back. I mean, he's touring now. He released music on a major label. I think most people believe that either he's innocent or that it was just kind of a gross toxic situation all the way around. You know what I'm saying? And so there was no real
yeah,
reason to keep racking up millions of dollars when, and the judge, look, let me tell you something else, y'all. The judge in these cases matters a lot. People can argue about the law and say, well, I know the law better than you or whatever. And look, at times we all get sort of dramatic online. I've gotten into many, I was going to say this earlier, I've gotten into many sort of like dramatic little mini feuds with people at times online about things. And I look back on it and I'm just like, oh, that was really stupid and stuff or whatever. Right. But I just want to remind everybody, a lot of this is going to come down to what the judge thinks. And for instance, in the Manson situation, the judge was saying some really inappropriate stuff in some of her legal briefs or her legal proclamations. And I don't know, Leanne, what you think about this, but in one of her briefs, the judge talked about how she was feeling exhausted having to read these long briefs that Manson's team presented before her, and she was tired. It was all of this sort of like moaning about, like, I feel like my time's being wasted and stuff. And and I'm thinking, it's almost like there's a kind of a bias here that's becoming pretty clear in this situation, that you think that this suit is just wasting your time, even though the guy is presenting all of this hardcore evidence, but whatever. And I just wanted to say
yeah.
that I really feel I don't know about you, but I have a good feeling so far about the judge in Baldoni's case. I feel like he's like
Oh,
on top
yes.
of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, no, I absolutely do. I I know people are kind of, I've seen people, creators, kind of talking about, his brother being someone who worked with Blake Lively once. It was a 3-minute video. She had one line, honestly, and it was 15 years ago.
Well,
Um,
and I can guarantee you, Leanne, if the brother worked with Blake Lively, then the brother probably knows that she's a nightmare.
exactly. But I mean, I know the motion to strike. People that they didn't like it, and I understand. But in my last video, I actually explained that, and he had to do that, and I think he's done that actually, and I think it will. It's the reason he's done that is because basically at the time, and we still don't know what Friedman's got, but at the time, it was kind of it was inflammatory, I know Friedman was responding to Blake Lively. Blake Lively should never have filed her letter. Not disagreeing with that, but what Friedman was saying, it provoked a media frenzy.
Which one? I'm
It
sorry.
did.
Remind me what we're talking about here.
So this is the motion to strike. So I'm just talking about the judge's kind of my view basically on the judge's bias. So
The motion to
the
strike from
motion to
this week on the amicus curiaes, or what are you talking about?
no, not on the amicus curiae. Remember the Taylor Swift subpoena?
Yes. Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah,
Like I said,
yeah.
I'm not a legal mind, so I have to start like, what is she talking about? Okay. So yeah, okay,
No,
I
no,
got
that's
you.
fine.
So
Sorry.
when the judge
So
ruled basically and said, just to remind some of us, basically it was when the judge kind of semi chastised Brian Friedman for bringing that out into the open, basically about Taylor
yeah, I
Swift.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That was a
Gotcha.
slap on the wrist. Honestly, the judge could have applied sanctions if he was really that annoyed. But all that was it was to because what the judge was saying is, look, this is causing a media frenzy. I can't have it on my docket, and also I can't do anything because the subpoena you're arguing about is in a different court under a different judge, and that is completely true. But my people were quite annoyed that he granted the motion to strike, but I'm glad he did because if he hadn't, then it could have caused a problem for the case. It could have affected the integrity of the case. It is not the two lawyers were sitting there kind of fighting like toddlers over and it wasn't the right place to do it so publicly. Friedman could have gone to the judge, quietly behind closed doors and said, look, I've got this information. But he didn't, and and the newspapers picked it and they went bananas. And the thing is if you compromise, if you do something that compromises the case could then kind of be struck. It could end up in a mistrial
Right.
later on,
Right.
or it could end up with a defense. If he hadn't struck the document and Blake Lively later argued and said, "Oh my God, he didn't do this and compromised my case," which he's then got grounds for an appeal. So
Right.
actually, that decision it didn't go in Blake Lively's favor at all. Um, Friedman, if he's got the information now, which I think he has, I'm waiting to see how he presents it. But I think so far the judge's judgments have been incredibly fair. He's not granted things to Lively, he's not granted things to Friedman, and he's given both ways. I have not seen anything about Judge Lyman that makes me sit there and think, right, okay, he's on one side or the other. And actually, he's playing it like Judge Penny did in Johnny Depp's case. She was incredibly fair. She gave and took from both, and I loved the way she conducted that case. With Marilyn Manson, I agree with you. That was certainly quite one-sided. But just to kind of ask you actually, if we had this law, because remember now, Amber Heard tried to get her case heard in California. It's only because I think the servers for the was it the
Yeah, they
Washington?
that's right. So Johnny
Uh,
Depp side lucked out in the fact that, she'd written that defamatory essay in the Washington Post, which
yeah,
was based out of Virginia. It was really lucky.
yeah, that was very lucky. But can you imagine if she was bringing that case here today, and we all saw that trial, we saw the evidence, but she would have had an almost automatic defense from the outset just because of the state she brought it at the
Yes, if
time
she
she
had brought it
brought
in
it.
California. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, he
but
couldn't have
I
brought it in
mean,
California, I don't think.
no, and I think Baldoni's got an even stronger case than Amber Heard. With
Oh,
with
yeah.
with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, I thought there was a bit of wriggle room that, at minimum, I don't think Johnny Depp was abusive. I think Amber Heard was, but I certainly think that together they were toxic and they both had a propensity for calling names and throwing stuff at each other. But I actually believed Amber Heard initially when it first came out because I saw photos with her of her face with bruises on.
Right.
And
Right.
it's only through watching the trial and seeing the actual evidence which come after
Right.
discovery that you realise that that's not a bruise. It's a
Right.
makeup kit.
Right.
So, but we wouldn't have had all of that discovery. Like it would be effectively well, UK case that Johnny Depp went to, she didn't have to go through discovery, so therefore she cherry picked what she sent to the judge, and she didn't win, but she helped the newspaper company organization win. And we'll just have a replay of that. But that would be such a horrific situation. And to be honest, now that's two very high profile cases that are proven to be false allegations. I think, they could serve as a kind of a basis argument to say, well, hold on a minute, not
Right.
every woman tells the truth.
Right. Well, exactly, exactly. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to really lean into as well with this. And I think that it's worth noting that the standard for I don't know about this new legislation, the anti-harassment or the AB whatever it is 933. I'm blanking on it, but
And yeah, so it's Assembly Bill 933. It is also known as Section 47.1.
right. So I don't know about how strict the guidelines are on that. I know like with anti-slap, and this happened with the Manson case, the the standards are so high for getting a defamation case over the anti-slap. The standards were so high that even a really good case like his, it just couldn't clear it. And unfortunately, people who don't know the situation, they look at that and they say, "Well, he must not have had a very good case. The judge threw it out." And it's like, no, you just don't understand, because the goal, as these two amicus curiae briefs pointed out, the goal is of these types of laws is actually to discourage defamation lawsuits. It's not just to be fair, y'all, and it's not just to discourage problematic or retaliatory defamation lawsuits. Honestly, the reality is that these laws were designed to discourage defamation lawsuits in general based on sexual harassment and sexual assault claims, because these laws are politically pushed on us by people who believe or claim to believe that the vast majority of claimants, when they claim harassment or assault, are telling the truth. Again, I don't think that's the case, and I especially don't think that this is the case when we're talking about Blake Lively. And one of the points that I made in my letter is, I hope the judge also will take into consideration the anomalous nature of this case and Blake Lively's claims, that we're not talking about, as these amicus curiae briefs keep saying, we're not talking about your average woman. We're not talking about your average woman's experience. We're not, and you just look at her claims and you'll see that this woman is out to fucking lunch. I didn't say that in the letter, but she's out to fucking lunch. And I hope that the judge, I think there's only so far that we should go in thinking about everything just in terms of precedent. And, oh, Judge Lyman, if you rule this way, then think about the chilling effect it'll have on so many other women with claims. Okay, but also at a certain point, the truth just matters. And in this case, we're looking at a woman with ridiculous claims who tried to ruin a man, and turns out she was the one who was doing the harassment. She was the one who was creating a toxic work environment. She was the one who was raising hell at Sony, punishing this dude and this entire movie studio. I mean, really, she's the one who should be getting run out of town, so to speak. So, sorry, that was a lot of ranting.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's fine. I mean, it's not even, the brief didn't actually even just stop at the chilling effect of survivors. It actually went further. The very last page, the footnote at the bottom, even said, well, if this case proceeds, it's going to have a chilling effect on the lawyers. So they won't be able to zealously advocate for survivors, which is
Ridiculous.
sorry, it's absolute crap. Because if you're good at your job, you can zealously advocate, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not worried about any lawyers being able to not being able to zealously advocate for their clients in this. Let me ask you a question. I saw that I saw there was a little discussion online about Elise's claims, and I don't know if I misunderstood or not, but you were saying you didn't want to focus so much on the validity of her claims as more of the argument that she was making in the brief or whatever. But it doesn't, and maybe I've mischaracterized what you said there. So again, people need to understand. I'm just dipping in and out of stuff right now. I'm too busy to follow everything. But do you think that how do you think that the judge looks at a letter like that, where this woman is going on and on and on with her dubious sounding sob story? I mean, the way that she wrote it was so melodramatic. It didn't even seem like a legal brief to me. I'm like, is this your diary? Like, what's going on here?
It does. It did seem to. I mean, I didn't cover. The reason I didn't cover her letter was because um, Lauren, oh gosh, Lauren Naidy, Court of Random Opinion, and Cassidy O'Connell. They actually had they done a video where Cassidy had done this
And they're
absolutely
great, by the
incredible
way. Yeah, people need to
research.
check out.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
They'd really. I mean, she'd really gone right down into investigating this and kind of. I don't want to paraphrase here, but the bit I watched a video and whilst I was working on my thread for the charity ones, and what my takeaway from the video was that this was an 11-year long affair. Now, yes, probably inappropriate at the start because they were, I think, college professor and student, um, but they were both married. And it went on for 11 years, and she worked all that time, and she worked afterwards too. So she didn't lose any opportunities. But the text messages, she was the one that was harassing him, stalking him, calling his new girlfriend and so on and so forth. And then when he wouldn't kind of listen to her, go take her back, then she filed a complaint. Because, well, no, she didn't. She made a complaint to the university, I believe. Now he did eventually lose his job, but she ended up he filed a defamation claim, and she ended up selling it and paying him money.
Well, probably because at least a little bit of research that I did into it, it's because the portrayal or depiction that she was giving of this relationship was not accurate to the reality of it. So I have a background in academia, as you know. I used to be a lecturer. I was never a tenured or tenure track professor or anything like that, but I've taught college English and other courses, for 20 years before I got out. And I did the whole PhD and all of that. Here's my point. I have over the years seen some various affairs between teachers and students, and I'm not saying that that's good, and I'm not saying that's appropriate. I'm not saying it's the healthiest thing or whatever, but I have never seen or known of this, or whatever I should say. I've never known of a situation where it was not consensual, where you had this lecherous professor that was just manipulating this unknowing wide-eyed woman. Like, generally speaking, it's often the students that I've seen, of like people that I've known who've gone into this stuff. It's the students who are often initiating these things, or are very eager to get on the same page with the professor, so to speak. Again, I'm not saying it's okay, and they're and a professor these days who's doing that stuff should be expected to get fired and whatever, right? But I'm just saying that her
Yeah.
depiction of that relationship, it reminded me a lot of a case that I covered pretty extensively a couple of years ago, of a biologist named David Sabatini. I did a few videos on it. People can look it up. They can Google him. And in his case, he had he wasn't married, but he had a relationship, sexual relationship, with a grad student. Now, and people should understand, grad student means you're getting up there, you are fully an adult. Okay, so not everybody knows what that means, but that's not college, right? So we're talking about someone who's well into adulthood, who's had a lot of experiences and knowledge of the world and whatever, right? He had a relationship with a grad student who was not even under him, no pun intended, but under him professionally. It was like she was working for a different lab or whatever, right? Well, they had a consensual relationship. There are texts to prove that it was fully consensual, and that she was very worldly, in fact, and sophisticated about sexuality and relationships, and gave off this air of like, I just like to fuck. I don't give a shit, whatever. And guess what? She ended up developing more of an interest in him than he had in her. He broke it off with her. She went, yes, all Glenn Close, like in Fatal Attraction, got him fired, lobbied a bunch of people like Blake Lively did, kind of with the cast of It Ends With Us, lobbied people in the department to go against him, threatened litigation. She was a very wealthy woman, wealthy family, threatened all kinds of litigation against the school. Anyway, long story short, got him basically fired, forced to resign, totally ruined his life, and his life imploded for a while. He sued her for defamation, and he got a job in Europe, and she ended up settling with him. And so that case went away because she settled. But and I hear that his life is on track now, and he's got a good job in Europe. He couldn't get a job here. One of the most brilliant scientists of our time could not get a job here. And do you want to know why? NYU tried to hire him, but a bunch of woke students and woke faculty at NYU staged a protest and said NYU cannot hire a sexual predator. So he could not get hired in the United States. So he was unemployed for several years. Finally, a school in Eastern Europe where they're a little more open-minded on stuff like this picked him up, and he's working there now. Absolute fucking ridiculous story. Anyway, I'm sorry. I went on another tangent, but it's stuff like that. I get shades of that with this Elise woman. I don't know.
No, I think I'm inclined to actually agree with that, because whilst the working, I mean, over here though, that's slightly different. People work together or married, or
Right.
they, but if there's two consenting adults, to have someone labeled a sexual predator is, in my mind, it's just ridiculous. To ruin their life, their career is ridiculous, because
Right.
if they'd met a different way, i.e. it wasn't through, being a tutor or professor and being a student, no matter how old they are, no one would take exception to that relationship. So I don't know. I just don't like all these labels. I mean, I can understand sexual predator being applied to someone if the student was in school, for instance, then yeah, absolutely, that's
In
disgusting, and
in your
someone
class, your
should
student in your
actually,
class. Yeah, yeah. You give it, and
yeah,
these things have been
but
understood for a long time. Go ahead. Sorry.
exactly. But they were both in kind of higher education. They were both adults. They were both married even. So, they weren't. There was no kids, or I would, it's unfair. I do think it's unfair to say, well, um, you know, she was impressionable.
Right.
They were still having this affair when she was out of education and working.
Right. Right. And yes, and the label of impressionable, it doesn't do us any good as women. And this is something that I've been talking about for years on my channel. And I've done videos even looking at sort of feminist theory, which I used to study, and even, believe it or not, I even taught some gender courses in college. And there used to be this understanding or this strain in more classical feminism, and I'm not saying I support everything about classical feminism either, but it used to be about getting away from that view of women as wide-eyed, in need of a chaperone, in need of delicate protection. She can't handle the big bad professional world of men. She can't handle going out on a date without having someone chaperoning her and stuff. Women wanted to get away from this, and it seems like now, and I'm not the first to say it, it seems like now we've got an obsession with victim feminism that just wants to bring all of that back. And what I would say to a lot of these women, and what I would say to the Elises of the world, and the ERAs even of the world, is that if you insist on this one-dimensional view of women as perpetual victims who can't handle even the nuances of sort of gray areas of consent and working together with the other gender and so forth, if your view of woman, the view that you're presenting to us is of an infantilized woman that can't handle these things, then eventually people are going to start believing you, and they're going to start changing their behavior toward women. They're going to go back to a much more reductive vision of the sexes and gender and femininity that I thought we'd gotten away from here. So anyway, I've got to go.
Yeah.
As you know, I've got to go to work and everything. I just want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to get out of here. You can say goodbye to your people or keep talking or whatever you want to do. But I do hope, I do really appreciate the work that you do online, and a lot of this stuff people need to understand. I don't know anything about what other people are doing, or anything. So this isn't a statement on anyone else, but I want people to understand, like, we're all doing the best we can with this stuff, and we're talking, this legal stuff is extremely, a lot of it's very subjective, and that's why people argue about it so much, and people can have different opinions. There's different case law, there's different insights and whatever, but ultimately all that we're all trying to do is just provide some resources for people who are interested in paying attention to this stuff. And nothing that any of us are doing is going to have some earth-shattering effect on Baldoni's case. And so I hope that people will have a gentle view of, will go easy on us when we make mistakes at times, if and when we make mistakes. And I always keep, and I'm not saying you have, I'm just speaking in general of this idea that, like, well, she said the wrong thing. And, it's like, okay, you know, that there's something about the famous quote by Teddy Roosevelt. I hope everybody looks it up if you don't know it, about the arena, and about the greatest respect should go to the man or woman who's out in the arena, not the critic who's sitting on the sidelines, telling them how they could do it better, right? And so that's something I try to keep in mind. And I try to keep in mind with all of us too, is that we're working in a very fucked up medium with all this social media stuff. And a lot of the time I've gotten into feuds or disputes with people where if we could just get together in a room and talk, I know we'd have it sorted out in like 1 minute. But it's the nature of the beast with all of this posting this and that, and oh, she said this and that. And you know what I'm saying? It gets very, very distorted, very aggressive quickly. So anyway, that's just a little
No,
advice
you're absolutely right.
who's been in this game now for almost 5 years. I've had so many feuds with people that are now like good friends of mine and whatever, and it comes and goes. I remember when Laura B, not Laura B on this chat, but the other Laura B, I remember when we used to say terrible things to each other over Twitter, and we blocked each other and all of that. And then now we chat all the time over DM and stuff. So anyway, I got to go. Thanks everybody. I'm going to get out of here. See you later. Bye.
All right, bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Oh, wow, that was really kind of us. I will be, she will obviously represent the issues that have been clearly going on with some of the vitriol I received from a certain content creator over kind of correcting her on her citation of a law. I will probably be addressing this a little bit tomorrow, just to kind of say, do you know what? This is my stance, this is what happened, and now I'm putting it to bed, and then that will be the last thing I say about it. But yes, she's right. So anyway, this was my first live and I was so nervous. I hope it went well. I'm hoping to have more guests join me over the next few weeks or so. And obviously in between I'll still be doing my X threads as things come out, and my Sunday weekly recap, bit pre-recorded videos like premieres. And hopefully I'll still be doing stuff with CJ. CJ, you need to get in touch with me and we need to do our show. I miss you. And my deep dive series. So yeah, I've got so much going on at the moment. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be doing this again really soon. Take care.